Thank you very much. I appreciate that introduction. Never had applause before a sermon before, but I guess that's the best time to have it because you may never get one. My reading this morning is from Ralph Waldo Emerson's Divinity School Address, given in 1838 at Harvard. And it was an address to students who were graduating from the Harvard Divinity School at that time. Live with the privilege of the immeasurable mind. And when you meet in your parish connection one of these men and women, be to them a divine person, be to them thought and virtue. Let their timid aspirations find in you a friend. Let their trampled instincts be genially tempted out in your atmosphere. Let their doubts know that you have doubted, and their wonder feel that you have wondered. By trusting your own heart, you shall gain more confidence in other people. For all our penny wisdom, for all our soul-destroying slavery to habit, it is not to be doubted that all have sublime thoughts, that all value the few hours of life. They love to be heard. They love to be caught up into the vision of principles. We mark with light in the memory the few interviews we have had, and in the dreary years of routine, with souls that made our souls wiser, that spoke what we thought, that told us what we knew. They gave us leave to be what we inwardly were. Just charge to others the priestly office, and present or absent, you shall be followed with their love as by an angel. Now, in a spirit of meditation, please. Thankful can I ever be for everything that is bestowed upon me. Thankful for the joys and sorrows, for the blessings, and yes, even the blows. Thankful for the wisdom gained through hardships and adversity. Thankful for the undertones as well as for the melody. Thankful may I ever be for benefits, both great and small, and never fail in gratitude for that divinest gift of all, the love of friends that I have known in times of failures and success. Oh, may the first prayer for my day always be one of thankfulness. I spent most of my ministry in New England, in the Boston area. And Boston and New England are sort of more time-conscious than I learned out here in Tucson since living here. We're a little more relaxed. During the first 40 years of my ministry, or even more, we had a 1-hour service. That was it. My first church, a man came out and he looked at his watch, 2 minutes too long. So now I'm beginning a sermon now, and we've already been going for a while. And I can always throw papers off my shoulder and not give it, but I thought since I write it ahead of time, you might as well get the whole thing. So, coffee hour may be delayed a bit. The last time I delivered a sermon here was in October, when Ron was in his first months of sabbatical leave. Before that, I had delivered 7 other sermons in this congregation. The first one in 1992, when I was Director of Extension at the Unitarian and Universalist Association. I was visiting you in order to accept you in the new ministry program for a congregation. If my memory serves me, your acceptance included a $20,000 grant over a 5-year period. So I've known your congregation for many years, and nowadays, as I live just a few miles from you, I suppose you will become my congregation so to speak. I don't say this lightly, for in the past 25 years you have evolved into a vital congregation that offers a distinctive light in the northwest Tucson, Atlanta area. Once you are settled in your new building, I look forward to seeing a larger and even more vital congregation. But even now, I am personally grateful for your committed leaders, your generosity, and the 100 or so people who attend here most every Sunday. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, no less. Despite any setbacks that may occur, I believe in the words of Julian of Norwich, all will be well. 57 years ago, I formally began my ministry career. I was 23 years old at theological school at Tufts University, and I began a student ministry at the First Universalist Church in Framingham. It was a part-time ministry with a salary of $2,800. I was expected to preach every Sunday, meet with committees, and call on the sick and the elderly. During my time there, the congregation merged with the First Parish in Framingham, a Unitarian congregation, and 6 years later I was called to that congregation and enjoyed a 17-year ministry. But I still hold it in my heart that I'm the last ordained Universalist minister before merger. From those early days, every time I deliver a sermon, I've wanted it to be the best I could offer. Most often I write several drafts and choose words and phrases carefully, seeking a flow that seems impossible if I were extemporaneous. The results, perhaps, are similar to this story. A minister brings his 5-year-old son to the adult service, sits him in the front row because his son wanted to see what his father did at work. The son observed everything that happened, and while driving home after the service, the son asked, "Dad, why do you always keep your eyes closed before the service?" The father answered, "Well, I'm praying to God to give me a very good sermon." After a time of silence, his boy asked, "Well, why doesn't he?" Last month I became 82 years old, and here I'm still trying to deliver that best sermon. It takes a lot longer to look presentable on Sundays as well. Increased anxiety also comes from the aging process where mispronounced words slip out or aren't even remembered to get that far. Billy Collins, an American poet laureate, offers this perspective. The name of the author is the first to go, followed obediently by the title, the plot, the heartbreaking conclusion, the entire novel, which suddenly becomes one you have never read, never even heard of. And if one by one the memories you used to harbor decided to retire to the southern hemisphere of the brain to a little fishing village where there are no phones. Long ago you kissed the names of the 9 muses goodbye and watched the quadratic equation pack its bag. And even now, as you memorize the order of the primes, you forget. Something else is slipping away. A state flower, perhaps. The address of an uncle. The capital of Paraguay. Whatever it is, you are struggling to remember. It is not poised on the tip of your tongue. Not even lurking in some obscure corner of your spleen. It has floated away down a dark mythological river whose name begins with an L, as far as you can recall. Well on your own way to oblivion, where you will join those who have even forgotten how to swim and how to ride a bicycle. No wonder you rise in the middle of the night to look up the date of a famous battle in the Book of War. No wonder the moon in the window seems to have drifted out of a love poem you used to know by heart. To be them a divine man was the title of a sermon delivered at my ordination, April 23rd, 1961. The words come from Emerson's Divinity School address. I was ordained in a small rural Universalist church in Hardwick, Massachusetts, a town with more cows than people. It was just 3 weeks before the Universalists and the Unitarians merged into the Unitarian and Universalist Association, so I consider myself the last ordained Universalist minister. Back in 1961, there were no health, life, disability, insurance, no pension or professional expenses for ministers. So when my eldest daughter was born that year, I had to apply for ministerial aid to help pay for the doctor and hospital bills. But I had no college loans, so different from 25-year-olds today. Now, 57 years later, I live a comfortable life assisted by Social Security, Medicare programs, and a UUA retirement plan that was first offered by our association when I was 27. 1961 was an exciting year for most Americans. The torch had been passed to a new generation as John F. Kennedy was inaugurated President of the United States, and a spirit of idealism seemed injected into the nation's character. I, along with many, was optimistic. Results were seen in the Peace Corps, the Job Corps, and the Initiative for Space Travel. 1961 was also a hopeful, idealistic time for Unitarians and Universalists. The birth of the UUA, our association in Boston in May 1961, injected us with a similar enthusiasm. Some imagine us as the new Fourth American faith, influential just as the Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish faiths were. That didn't happen, for today we just have 3,000 more members than we had in 1961. 57 years ago, I remember how innocent we were. It was reflected in a national mood offered by John Wayne at the movies, Camelot on Broadway, Leave It to Beaver on television, and the best-selling song, Love Makes the World Go Round. Our innocence ended as the decade passed. John F. Kennedy, our president, was shot and killed. Malcolm X, an original Black Lives Matter prophet, was shot and killed. Martin Luther King Jr., a prophet for equality and justice, was shot and killed. Robert Kennedy, a powerfully articulate candidate president, was shot and killed. A number of civil rights workers, several thousands in Vietnam, some students at Kent State University, as well as several black children in a Birmingham church school, were all killed. These events reshaped what many of us believed and how we behaved. But it hasn't ended, has it? Noticing this week when others were shot and killed in a school, and guns still remain sacred. One major event in 1965 was when Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique, was published. It offered a new identity to millions of women. Another was the birth control pill for women. It offered a new sexual comfort to countless couples, as well as liberating human sexuality and a stronger condemnation of sexism. Some 53 years later, it's still being confronted, along with racism and homophobia. In 1961, some 41 ministers were welcomed into the first General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association. I was one of them, along with 39 other men. Only one woman was in this group. Oh, and there were no gay men or lesbians, so far as we knew or acknowledged. No African American or Hispanics either. Today, 55% of ministers are women. Gay and lesbian ministers are well represented, while a Latino recently served as our denomination's president. Back at church, we all dressed up. Some women still wore hats and girdles. After church, Many of us smoke cigarettes during coffee hour, church meetings, and suppers. What else was there to do without cell phones, texting, email, and just 3 channels on television? No answering machines for a telephone, no faxes, no digital cameras or Google photocopiers, not even a border patrol to be aware of. Our average age was younger, and some tell us that makes no difference. Yet 38% of millennials, those born after 1980, have tattoos somewhere on their bodies, while less than 5% of the people my age do. And 2% of millennials are veterans, while 24% of the people my age are. Generational differences do influence who we are, how we behave, and all this is reflected in our worship, language, and behavior. And that is why more often than not I feel more a part of the last century than this one, and why more often than not young people are not seen as much in church. For 50 years my motto in ministry has come from the words of John Murray, the founder of Universalism in America. He said, "Go out into the highways and byways of America and give the people something of your vision. You may possess only a small light, but uncover it. Let it shine, and use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of men and women. Give them not hell, but hope and courage." I've tried to do that in whatever ministry role I found myself. But mostly I've been blessed beyond all words for the opportunities I've had. Many of these came from being at the right place at the right time. Fortunate occurrences that most of my colleagues have not had. So it is that I have traveled on behalf of our faith from the Pacific shores of Olympia, Washington, to the Indian Ocean in Sri Lanka. Visited over 150 congregations in many cities and towns in America, as well as helped to lead conferences in Derbyshire, England, Leipzig, Germany, Prague, and the Czech Republic, and Budapest, Hungary. From these experiences, I have met many dedicated, inspiring Unitarians and Universalists from all parts of the world. Few ministers have had the opportunity to work at the Unitarian Universalist Association in Boston, but I have. For some 11 years, commuting to work by bus or train. In addition, only about 15% of my colleagues ever experienced serving just one congregation for more than 15 years. So in Framingham, it was for 17 years, and I learned about people in a long-term ministry, from mourning with them as we observed the death of Martin Luther King Jr., to officiating at a wedding of the grandchild of someone whose death I observed a decade before. Being at this right place at the right time has also been a gift to me beyond measure. The staff of the Framingham Church included a settled African-American minister, just one of 7 serving a UU congregation at that time. All the while serving the only church in the town, indeed our area, to sponsor a Vietnam moratorium service, a draft counseling service for young men, as well as sponsoring a clergy counseling service for problem pregnancies, as it was called, a service offered in some churches before Roe and Wade to help women who wish to end their pregnancies find a physician who would do it safely. So we provided the names of physicians in Canada, England, Mexico, just one in Maryland. And I was in the right place at the right time, at least for some women, and I'm grateful for that. But there are other highlights of my 57 years that I am proud of and grateful for. One was in my participation in the march from Selma, Alabama in 1965. It was first organized after Jimmy Lee Jackson was murdered in a voter registration drive. The march of 600 people was aborted at the Edmund Porter Bridge when Sheriff Bull Connor's deputies used clubs, tear gas, and attack dogs to disperse the marchers. For the first time in our nation, nightly television news covered the event in the northern states. 2 days later, 3 Unitarian Universalist ministers were leaving a restaurant in Selma, and they were beaten, and one of them, James Reed, was killed. 10 days later, I was at a ministers' meeting in Keene, New Hampshire, when we received word that the UUA president of that time, Dana Greeley, had chartered a plane from Boston for those who wanted to participate in the last day of the march from Selma. 2 of us signed up, and we flew to Birmingham, where we stayed overnight, sleeping on the floor of a church member's living room. The next day we were bused to Birmingham and joined some 25,000 others who marched to the Capitol Square, where we heard Martin Luther King speak. What an inspiration to hear him in that setting, even though he was not allowed to speak from the top of the steps, but had to speak from the street below. I already alluded to a second highlight, and that is my ministry at First Parish in Framingham. I was 31 years old, and my 17 years there were still the longest ministry to that congregation since 1886, when a minister stayed for 18 years. There, in a beautiful replica Georgian colonial meeting house, I delivered sermons from an hourglass pulpit, while across the parking lot in the parish house was the 4th largest Unitarian Universalist church school in New England. And yes, we had a Paul Revere bell in the steeple. During that ministry, the congregation permitted me to serve me as a minister on loan on 4 occasions, which has been mentioned also in the introduction. So I went to, my family and I went to Corpus Christi in 1972, Fort Worth, Texas in 1974, and Las Cruces in 1978, Vancouver, Washington in 1982. The congregation I served let me leave for 6 weeks during the active time of year because they had good, strong leadership. One of the nice things about it is that when guests came while I was away, they said, "You have to come back to hear the minister when he comes back." I came back and all these guests came. A wonderful experience. But they allowed their minister to leave rather than to hold on to him or her. And that made all the difference in a longer-term ministry, as well as in that congregation where the lay leadership blossomed. Another appointment was my appointment to the Unitarian Universalist Association Ministerial Fellowship Committee in 1972. This committee is responsible for the certification of all our ministers. We interviewed all candidates, listened to them deliver a short sermon, and answered our questions. I was appointed about the time more women were entering the ministry. I served for 9 years and probably heard over 400 sermons. I experienced firsthand the committee's transformation from sexism, homophobia, and racism to greater empowerment of diversity. And an added highlight was that while I was chair, and later on the staff in the Department of Ministry, I spoke to several thousand people each year in the Service of Living tradition at the UUA General Assembly. Then I was appointed Director of Extension in the UUA in 1990. It was while serving in this capacity that I first met you. I've always been a kind of evangelist, so that when I was offered the position, I jumped at it. I oversaw a loyal staff of 10 people, a budget of over $1 million, and newer marketing initiatives, so we sponsored the first national mid-size and large-size congregations. Each year, our mission-directed staff met our goals, and for 3 to 5 years I was there, the UUA membership had the highest membership increase since merger. Finally, my ministry to the First Parish in Groton, Massachusetts, and it was only for 4 years, hardly comparable to 17 years in Framingham, but it was dramatically different in 2 ways. One was that I had learned and experienced a great deal, both personally and professionally, so I was able to help evolve a significant culture change in the dynamics of a Groton church, small, rural, limited, to empowering a vital suburban congregation going from a place largely influenced by older people who saw the world that way to a church largely influenced by younger members who saw the world that way, going from a scarcity to a generosity perspective, from a we can't do it to a we can do it mindset. And when it came to sermons I preached, the programs I led, and the institutional decisions that involved, it was the most successful ministry I had, even though only in 4 years. These are just a few highlights of the past 57 years I've been around in the ministry. Far deeper, however, are the images of individual people with whom I came into contact. My 4th funeral as a minister was for a woman who lived when Abraham Lincoln was president. My last child's dedication was for someone who, if she lives as long as that woman, will extend to 2012. That is a spread of 239 years. I see in mind's eye individual people, some standing tall and inspiring me to do likewise, others feeling low in their grief or failure, so wanting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. Many are named in my ministerial book of records: 352 weddings, 95 funerals, 143 child dedications, and as Bob Hope would sing, thanks for the memories, I am so grateful. And who knows, this may be my last sermon, one never knows. Now enough about me. What about you? First, let me thank you for inviting me back to address you. Now that I live in Tucson, you are the closest UU church to my home. But I must confess I still miss the George the Colonial Meeting House on the square in Framingham, where I delivered over 500 sermons. A parish church established in 1701, with Paul Revere out in the steeple, rung on the hour, and every Sunday morning at weddings and at funerals. A Frederick Lucian Hosmer organ in the balcony. This is the first year I'm not returning for at least one sermon to a congregation where the grandchildren of some whom I spoke to 50 years ago now attend. But let me say this, as my current congregation, you are fine just as you are. I have no complaint, and I hope you don't either. You have so much going for you. Now in your midst, you have a minister who loves and respects you, and yes, may stick around for a while if you provide him for what he needs to make that happen. And soon in your new building, you will have ample space to offer new programs and expand your membership under the roof of your new home. I'm grateful that I can watch it happen. You also have committed leadership. I see it operate and admire its strength. But the best leadership requires generous members who provide the financial resources they need to create the church facilities you need. Spacious, large, and flexible enough for all the programs, for all the ages that you want to be part of your congregation. You probably have no more than 1 or 2 members who are affluent enough to provide a very large campaign gift. That is why every one of us is needed to do our part. So together your leaders will have the resources to do what they must do to make your vision a reality. Many Christian churches talk about tithing in their congregations, that is, giving 10% of their income to the church. Mormons do, as well as some evangelists. But many of us also give to a wide variety of other charitable causes: colleges, hospitals, social service networks, political efforts, and of course, few, if any of us, profess to believing what the Bible mandates is tithing. Instead, some of us use the guideline of 3 to 5% of your income as a goal for giving. Given your current situation of moving ahead and building your own building, your 2 pledges may indeed be higher than that goal for a period of 3 years. I'm sure that many of you meet this goal when you support both your building fund and your annual pledge to the congregation. But if you are someone who is unable to afford it because of the stretch being too much, I suggest you think about breaking down the goal into a 3 to 5 year plan, during which you increase your support perhaps by 10 or 15% per year until you've reached your final goal. I am not a member of this congregation. I still have membership in Framingham, where I imagine my memorial service will be held. It's a place where my children grew up and Carol and I lived for 30 years. I also pledged to that congregation 2 other congregations, the UUA and UUSC, as well as other non-religious organizations. I'm sure you do too. But my pledge to this congregation will gradually become the largest contribution of any I make anywhere. I can't do it in 1 year, but over the few years I can. I share all this with you because it is Canvas Sunday, so I've been told, and I was asked to reference it in this sermon. Just saluting, following orders. So I'm asking you to think seriously about your pledge to this congregation for the coming year. And if you can't meet the guideline, just kind of increase your current giving by a percentage, and sometime you will in the future. But money isn't everything. So is the active involvement in some useful capacity in this congregation. And I'm so very grateful, and I do so admire your dedicated leadership. I hope that you do too. And also, whenever you have that opportunity, I do hope you will offer something from the words of John Murray. Go out into the highways and byways of America and give people something of your vision. You may possess only a small light, but uncover it and let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of men and women. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Thank you. We now have